Still have 9 minutes. Ah, the bells. Was that you or Rick, Sean? Okay, thanks, Rick, wherever you are in the belfry, obviously. Well, good morning, everyone, our tight little group of friends here. I am Reverend Karen LeBlanc, and I minister to this congregation as we minister to each other. I will be joined today by my good longtime friend Nico Turini, who is also a member of this church, longer than me, I believe. And we're going to be doing this special spring equinox session together. We are a beloved community here at First Unitarian who believe that everyone is worthy of respect, that science is real. It's so silly that we have to say that the democratic process is a sacred thing, and that we are all part of an interconnected web, and the light and energy we send out makes a difference in this world. We are people of purpose here, and everyone is welcome in this meeting house. If what you hear today resonates with you, or you, we hope you will consider becoming part of this way cool family of seekers and keepers of this very long dream that is our church. So a couple quick housekeeping things. Please keep your mask on while you're in service. I see everyone is in compliance there. Maintain your distance. There is hand sanitizer if you need it, pretty much all over the church, but there's one at the front and one in the back. And there will be no coffee hour once again. You all know that the half marathon is going on today, so after the service, if you'd like to go out and check that out, you can. We are streaming this service live, so if there is something that you would not like to share with the world, don't say it in front of the camera. And please put your phones into worship mode, if you will, to make this place sacred and separate from the rest of the mundane world. All right. We will light our chalice to begin with. There we go, there's matches right there. So in my tradition, we start and end our rituals just as the Celtic year begins and ends, which is in darkness. So before we start, everybody close your eyes. In a time beyond remembering, only the darkness stretched out in all directions, until there was light, and you may open your eyes. So these opening words that Nico are going to say for us is a basic circle casting. And this is some really simple one that I wrote many years ago for our RE group when we were doing the Wheel of the Year with the RE kids, when my sister actually was a teacher here. So I will light the candles, and Nico, you can say the words.
By east, by south, by west, by north, we call this sacred circle forth.
And this is a version of Awake by T. Thorne Coyle. In her version, you don't hear the second verse that we're going to do. It's sort of whispered in the background, but we're going to sing it so you can hear it today. Awake, awake, you ancient watchers. Awake, awake, and let me in. Come down from your waiting houses. Come down, and let me in. Jewel of the north, whose gates are emerald, flame of the south, whose gates burn red, well of the west, whose gates are wisdom, breath of the east, whose gates are still. Awake, awake, you ancient watchers. Awake, awake, and let me in. Come down from your waiting houses. Come down, and let me in. Okay, well, take the time to greet one another. You can almost, actually, everybody can greet everybody. We have the time. Is that Joan over there? Hi, Joan. You can come in. Oh. Well, you're welcome to move around and take as many pictures as you need to. Now we're going to read our covenant together, which is printed in your order of service. Do you have an order of service, Kathy? Okay. We come together as a religious community, upholding freedom of conscience, right relationship, and the inherent worth of all people. We value our diversity and pledge to care for one another in the spirit of compassion, to speak and listen to each other with respect, and to promote justice and kindness in the world. Okay, we will begin this part with our candles of joy and concern. This is where we come together and light a candle for anything that we are upset about or things that we just want to celebrate. So if anyone has something they would like to share, they are welcome to come up here to the microphone and do so now. I will light a first candle for my stepdad, Charlie, who you've seen in this sanctuary before. He was here just a couple of weeks ago, and he has COVID right now, and he already has COPD, and please send him lots of energy today. I love him to pieces, and he keeps my mother sane, so we got to keep him around. Don't want one of those lynch women going wild.
I do. I'm lighting a candle for my friend Amy, who is currently in the hospital with double pneumonia, but is on the mend.
Anybody else out there have something they'd like to share? Come on up, Lisa. I'll light a candle for you.
I'm not going to say her name because we're on camera. I'd just like for everybody to pray for my cousin who is recently diagnosed with cancer in the form of a GIST tumor, and for another cousin that is just struggling with life. So, thank you.
I'm sorry, Lisa. Go ahead, Rick.
I'd like to light a candle in celebration of this beautiful day. The mists this morning, watching the sunrise, it was just spectacular. And watching the rabbits run every which way, scurrying around. I had my radar on, so I didn't take any rabbit out. But I'm just grateful for the day. Blessed be.
Indeed. I am super grateful that Kathy Crowley is here today with us. And another thing I want to light a candle for today, because You all, most of you anyhow, know that I am a wicked Star Trek fan, right? So this past week, if anyone's who's watching the new Star Trek Discovery, it was the season finale. And during the season finale, the president of the Federation of Earth came out. We've been waiting for it all season. Who was the president? It was Stacey Abrams. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I literally jumped up out of my seat and started applauding and screaming and yelling. I was so overwhelmed, and it was so invigorating to see two powerful black women on stage together during the shooting of this. I was just like overcome and overwhelmed. So blessed be for Stacey Abrams and her ilk. And I light 2 final candles, as is our practice here, one for all the joys and the sorrows we keep in our hearts today, and one for all of those who have yet to find a wicked cool place like this to share their joys and their sorrows with. Our first reading, I had to call my husband and have him take a picture of the book that I left at home, and certainly was not going to turn around and go back after I was already parked in the lot. This is an excerpt from a book called Jesus and the Lost Goddess by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy. They have written several books together that are just terrific. Literalist Christianity took as its scriptural backdrop the Jewish Old Testament with its patriarchal monotheism. It therefore vigorously suppressed the idea that there was a Christian goddess. But the people's need to relate to the divine feminine was too strong to be ignored, and the void was quickly filled. In 431 CE, a Christian council met at Ephesus, previously the chief site of the worship of the pagan goddess, and bestowed the titles of the ousted goddess upon Mary, the mother of Jesus, honoring her as Queen of Heaven and Theotokos, Mother of God. Protestant literalists would later condemn this elevation of Mary, but ironically, it was actually a demotion. For the original Christians, Mary had always represented the goddess Sophia, Queen of Heaven. For the literalists, she was merely a mortal woman, special only because her son, Jesus, was divine. Literalists put an end to the Gnostic ideas of equality between the sexes. They interpreted the Jewish Genesis myth as literal history, with terrible consequences for women. Women were no longer seen as spiritual partners with men, but the descendants of the evil Eve, because of whose sin even the Son of God had to die, quote, Augustine wrote to a friend, and followed with this quote, "What does it matter whether it is a wife or a mother? It is Eve, the temptress, we must beware of in any woman." You should watch it. It's a promise, not a threat. Now we enter into the state of prayer and meditation, so breathe and join with me. I wrote this prayer a very long time ago. Persephone, bringer of springtime, brightener of seasons, gatherer of hope, breathe life into the earth. Send your breezes into dusty corners to clean them. Send your warm rays to soften the fertile ground. Send your gentle rain to feed new green shoots. Look with love upon my garden and my labors. Bless my hands as they turn the soil and plant the seeds. Bless my knees as they creak and groan. Bless my back as I rake and bag what's left of the winter and haul it to the curb. Goddess of the awakening world, grant me the strength to do the work that is required for growth and renewal. Amen. Now I'm going to read our meditation this morning, and it's called Instructions on Not Giving Up by Ada Limon. More than the fuchsia funnels breaking out of the crabapple tree, more than the neighbor's almost obscene display of cherry limbs shoving their cotton candy-colored blossoms to the late sky of spring rains, it is the greening of the trees that really gets to me. When all the shock of white and taffy, the world's baubles and trinkets, leave the pavement strewn with the confetti of aftermath, the leaves come. Patient, plodding, a green skin growing over whatever winter did to us, a return to the strange idea of continuous living despite the mess of us, the hurt, the empty. Fine then, I'll take it, the trees seem to say. A new slick leaf unfurling like a fist to an open palm. I'll take it all. Amen. We will observe a few moments of silence before our music.
Our second reading today comes from the blog post of Judy Chicago, who is one artist who I am very fond of. I first was introduced to her work at the beginning of my journey into the neo-pagan realm, and a lot of her work really resonated with me. And this is from her blog post from the Chicago Gazette of the 15th of this month. And she writes, "In 1969, when I was a young artist, barely 30, I decided to make a radical change in my art-making process, which had over the first decade of my professional practice become ever more minimal as I struggled to be accepted in the entirely male-centered art scene of Southern California. Because it was completely unacceptable for one's work to hint at one's gender or race, class, or sexual orientation, I had slowly erased almost all signs of my femaleness. At the same time, whenever I left my studio, I was confronted by sexism, which in the late 1960s couldn't even be named. If I tried leaving the studio, I would be asked, 'What are you, some kind of suffragette?' Which was definitely a disparaging term. This near-daily contradiction was making me angry. But anger can fuel creativity, which in my case it did. I decided that I would try to go back in time and reconnect with who I was at UCLA Graduate School, where, as a result of unending pressure and rejection, I had begun the process of eliminating any hint of my gender from my work. But I didn't really know how, nor did I have any models for how this might be achieved. I didn't even know any other women artists, as I was the only one who was barely being taken seriously in the macho LA art scene. I thought that perhaps if I taught female art students who were just starting out and helped them to be themselves in their work, I might be able to reconnect with my own impulses. So I looked for a teaching job away from LA where I wouldn't be subject to the art world and its attitudes. I was fortunate to be hired by Fresno State College, now the University of California, Fresno, and even luckier that the head of the art department agreed to let me establish an all-female art class, which would later be called the Feminist Art Program. However, I have to confess that along with a genuine desire to help young women become professional artists without having to do what I had done, i.e. hide my gender, I also wanted to figure out how to create a new kind of art which, like my program, came to be called feminist art. The first year of the women's class was a wild success, so much so that I was invited to bring my program along with some of my students to Cal Arts, the new art school in Southern California, where I would learn to teach with Miriam Shapiro, who was older than me and to whom I had looked up to for support and guidance, which turned out to be a big mistake, but that's another story. Because the Cal Arts building was not ready, we and our students met in each other's living rooms. Out of that domestic environment, and thanks to the art historian Paula Harper, who Cal Arts had hired to expand the slide library of women artists I had started in Fresno, a project was born called Woman House, the first major feminist art installation, which opened to the public in January 1972. During its month-long exhibition, Woman House was seen by over 10,000 viewers, and thanks to the film about the project by Joanna Dimitrikas, people all over the world learned about it. Since that time, Woman House has inspired dozens of projects, both on-site and online, but you'd never know it from its ongoing absence from art history.
So, yes, singing. So instead of a hymn from the hymnal this week, our second hymn is we're going to try to teach you a song today. One of the sort of central elements of a pagan ritual is raising energy. So this is something that we would sing in circle, and in our tradition, it says that you're supposed to go around and around and around until exhaustion, which is crazy, but a lot of people do it. But usually you just kind of go until you feel like you've raised enough energy. And this is one of those great little chants. It's actually a rather long chant. Gwydion Penderwent. It is in your order of service, so please sing along if you like. Trinky, you want to come up and sing Ladies Bransel? So if you want, bang on something, clap your hands. We're going to start real slow, and then we're going to get faster and faster and faster. And think while you're doing this. So this part of a ritual would be when you're actually raising energy and focusing your intention on the kind of magic that you'd like to do. And when you're running around and around and around in a circle and that stops, you can really feel the energy that produces when you're doing something like that together. I'm sure you have witnessed before. So I'm just gonna give a little beat. Oh, she will bring the buds in the spring and laugh among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kisses are sweet. She sings in leafy bowers. She cuts the cane and gathers the grain when the fruits of fall surround her. Her bones grow old in wintry cold. She wraps her cloak around her. Oh, she will bring the buds in the spring and laugh among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kisses are sweet. She sings in leafy bowers. She cuts the cane and gathers the grain when the fruits of fall surround her. Her bones grow old in wintry cold. She wraps her cloak around her. Oh, she will bring the buds in the spring and laugh among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kisses are sweet. She sings in leafy bowers. She cuts the cane and gathers the grain when the fruits of fall surround her. Her bones grow old in wintry cold. She wraps her cloak around her. Oh, she will bring the buds in the spring and laugh among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kisses are sweet. She sings in leafy bowers. She cuts the cane and gathers the grain when the fruits of fall surround her. Her bones grow old in wintry cold. She wraps her cloak around her. Oh, she will bring the buds in the spring and laugh among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kisses are sweet. She sings in leafy bowers. She cuts the cane and gathers the grain when the fruits of fall surround her. Her bones grow old in wintry cold. She wraps her cloak around her. Oh, she will bring the buds in the spring and laugh among the flowers. In summer's heat, her kisses are sweet. She sings in straight when roots of moss around her. Her boots were old and wintry cold, she wraps her cloak around her. Send that energy out to wherever it's needed, wherever you think it's needed, or just let it go where it's needed. It would be at this point where I would give you cakes and wine. But I don't have cakes and wine. I was gonna bring like Fig Newtons. That I'm like, do I want to explain to Tony why there's crumbs all over the pews? No, I'll let you guys just breathe it out. So now is the time in our service where we collect whatever donations you would like to give in order to support the good works of this church. And we are only 10 people or so today, so Lisa is going to be our only collector, which is fine. Sorry, I forgot to switch over the camera on you, Randy, and that's one of those great little pieces I would have liked to see your fingers fly on. When you watch our services online, our camera angle changes so you can watch Randy play, which is very cool. So a lot of you know that I am not just a Unitarian. I am a pagan Unitarian, a Wiccan Unitarian to be specific. I studied at Cherry Hill Seminary, one of the I'm pretty sure it's the only pagan seminary in the world that you can get a real master's degree from. I don't talk about it a lot here because we're in the Unitarian Church. It certainly informs what I do here, inspires me. Being a ritualist and a priestess for many years before taking the pulpit made me very comfortable up here, able to lead chants and stuff like that. So it's integrated into who I am. But I am a Unitarian minister as well. And as I was telling our visitors, Janelle and Rachel, earlier, that when I went to seminary, I had no idea that there were so many hyphenated pagans. They were pagan Quakers. I wanted to tell you about that, Rick. A really cool lady who was a pagan Quaker. There were pagan Buddhists. There were pagan Christians. There were pagan Jews. Didn't meet any pagan Muslims. Not one. But that's okay. I'm not surprised. But it was really cool and really interesting that so many people could integrate to sometimes very desperate kinds of theologies and bring them together as something that they could internalize. So that's just my little opening for that. Let me give you, this is a two-part sermon today, by the way. I'm going to give you the first part on old goddesses, and Nico will follow up with new goddesses. The voices of women, the power of women, and the worship of goddesses have been suppressed for millennia and reframed as evil by the earliest patriarchal monotheisms that we talked about earlier. There's a direct line of lies, like a centuries-long game of operator, from the earliest Jewish and Christian literalists right up to how women are represented in current mainstream religions. So I wanted to focus on the biblical aspects of these stories today because it's so pertinent in the world that we live in and the kind of society some of these great preachers of today would like us to live in, hoping to make us great again. Well, let's talk about what it was really like to be great again. So I have been fascinated by ancient history, the ancient world, for a very long time, and I started reading all I could about history and prehistory very early, especially as it pertained to the Bible. I was raised Catholic, and I was always sort of fascinated with the Bible as our sacred text, and I always had a lot of questions about it. And my dad was good enough to talk to me a lot. I spoke with him about this stuff often. My dad was a Catholic priest for 16 years before he married my mother, just in case you didn't know that. And he did have a very deep faith in God, but he also had a really keen interest in science and truth and history. Now, one day, he was called by the principal at work when I was in 8th grade after I had gotten into trouble about, we were having a discussion about Adam and Eve in class, and the teacher was talking about Adam and Eve as if the events in the Garden of Eden were real. And after a while, I raised my hand and I was like, but you know, the story of Adam and Eve is like a metaphor, right? And I said it was a way of explaining creation without knowing anything about science, like all people did everywhere. Every culture has a creation myth. And she was not happy with this comment at all. "Who told you that?" she asked. And with the snide little smile I get when I know my answer will really tick someone off, I said, "My father, and he was a Catholic priest." And of course, the priest is always right, especially in the Catholic religion, right? So when he was asked by our principal, who I swear was 7 feet tall and had another 2 feet of red hair piled on top of her head, when he was asked why he would tell me such a thing, he simply said, "Because that's the truth. I was taught in seminary. That's what I was taught. Jesus taught in parables and metaphor, and the Bible is bursting with allegory, so why would that story be any different?" They did not have an answer for that. He told me later on that Adam actually had a wife before Eve. Her name was Lilith. He didn't go into much detail, but of course, stuck in my mind. So I looked it up later, and I was astonished to find a far more interesting story than that of Adam and Eve. Now, these stories are very old, predating the Bible and the Torah, though Lilith is mentioned in the Talmud and some ancient mystical writings like the Zohar. The story has many versions, but they are all basically the same. God created man and woman at the same time from dust. And all was good in the garden until Adam decided he would like to know Lilith in the biblical sense, let's say. And why doesn't she just lay down there so he can get on with it? Now, the argument here is not that Lilith did not want to have sex. She just didn't think it was fair that she had to be on the bottom, as they were equals. So she refused. Now, here's where it verges into many different versions of the tale. Some say that God told her that if she did not comply, she would be killed. And she responded to that by taking flight out of the garden and going to live in the desert and not being killed despite the threat. Of course, there's a very big problem with that story because it would mean that maybe she had more power than God if she was able to avoid his wrath. So other versions have her running into a cave and somehow having hundreds of offspring made from stolen emissions from Adam and threatening to kill her children by the hundreds. She was relegated to becoming the embodiment of evil, the creature of darkness who would kill children as they slept. She was known far and wide in the ancient world for those attributes. So the moral of the story, though, in all versions is that women who think independently and will not bow to their husbands' wishes are evil, and they might as well be children killers. You might notice that protecting children has been the rallying cry of those who want to criminalize abortion and even birth control, while they consistently ignore the autonomy, health, and well-being of the women that they will ignore and deny support to once their babies are born. Don't even get me started. Today we honor Lilith's name. So let's move on to another goddess whose name has been similarly twisted to represent evil, and this is what the impetus for this, where the impetus for this sermon came from for me. I was reading an article in an online magazine called Religion Dispatches about a state senator in Pennsylvania. His name is Doug Mastriano, who is now running for governor. This guy is associated with all kinds of crazy things, including having just recently been subpoenaed by the January 6th committee to explain his trying to appoint a false slate of electors. But this article was about his involvement with the Rod of Iron Ministries. It says here, Rod of Iron Ministries is a schismatic offshoot of the Unification Church, often called the Moonies, if you remember, led by Hyung Jin, or Sean Moon, as he's known now, who was the son of the Unification Church's late founder, Sun Myung Moon. And he reorganized his ministry around a particular spiritual interpretation that the rod of iron in Psalms 2:9 and Revelation 2:26 is in fact an AR-15. Yeah, in the Bible, of course. There's a picture of Sean Moon at the top of this article, surrounded by guns and wearing a crown of bullets. It was obnoxious. But further down in the article, there was a sermon from Sean Moon from May 2021, quoting some QAnon-supporting prophet. And he said, "They have turned their back on God. Why? Because they have accepted pedophilia and child trafficking, selling their children to the Babylonian culture. Your families send their daughters to the temple prostitute, Asherah, in order that they be deflowered." Let me tell you right now, that man does not deserve to speak the name of Asherah. And she wasn't Babylonian. So who was Asherah? Essentially, she was God's wife. Asherah, along with Astarte and Anath, was one of the three great goddesses of the Canaanite pantheon. In Canaanite religion, her primary role was of mother goddess, and she was consort to the god El for a long time. And El, for a very long time, also was the big god of the early Semitic religions. It's even in the name, Israel. So after a time, El's popularity waned, and the Israelites picked up on a minor Canaanite god called Yahweh, and they made him the big god. And at first, Asherah came with him. There's some archaeological evidence, quite a bit at this point now, that's been found over the last 100 years or so that supports that for a time, these two were worshipped together as mother and father. Unfortunately for Asherah, the Israelites realized that the patriarchal monotheism that they envisioned was not going to work well with a goddess in the picture. So they began to associate her name with apostate behavior, which an apostate is someone who abandons their faith. And they did not want that association with her as a goddess. The creator needs to be one, and that one needs to be a dude. This makes no sense spiritually or even biologically, to tell you the truth. Asherah is mentioned about 40 times in the Bible, and her name also symbolizes the tree of life, which were represented as wooden staves, also called Asherah, but with a small a. And they were carried in during ceremonies and placed outside of temples. But as time moved on, she has been relegated, as Mary Magdalene has, to being an evil temptress of men. But today, we honor Asherah's name. The last person I want to talk about, whom I consider a goddess, but is a historical figure, is Jezebel. Now, her name has been given just as bad a rap as Karen. And if you grew up in any church anywhere, you would know that calling a woman Jezebel meant that they were loose women. Fornicators, sinners, right? How did that happen? Jezebel is mentioned in the Old Testament in Kings and Psalms. She was a Phoenician princess and a worshiper of, guess who? Asherah. She later married King Ahab of Israel. This is about 860 BCE. Though she had to leave her country, Jezebel's dedication to her gods inspired her to spread veneration among the Israelites. She set up altars to Baal and Asherah. She named 800 plus prophets, and she was given the title priestess of Asherah. Now, Elijah, yes, that Elijah from the Bible, came against Queen Jezebel and her prophets by challenging them on a mountaintop. He said basically something like, "Call on your God and have him burn the altars down if he's real." Supposedly, the altars were not burnt by Baal, but the altars set up by Elijah were immediately set on fire by his prayers to Yahweh, or his friends hiding behind the bushes. I don't know. And let me just point out for a second, for a religion who claims that magic is evil, there is a whole lot of magic they're doing in the Bible, okay? So following this spectacle, Elijah commanded the people to kill Jezebel's prophets, and they were thrown into the river. Eventually, a commander in Elijah's successor's army ordered Jezebel to be thrown from her palace window. So before her death, this tale goes, she was seen decked out in all of her finery, dressed like a queen, and she waved from the palace window before she was thrown out. She was determined to go out like a queen. She became known as a false prophet, and there are still churches out there who refer to women who prophesy and preach as Jezebels. And because she went out all dressed up and beautiful, she also became associated with becoming, of course, an evil temptress of men. From a modern pagan perspective, or anybody's perspective really, Queen Jezebel was an empowered woman who clung fiercely to her beliefs. Today we speak her name with honor, Jezebel. These are just 3 examples of how threatening the power of women is to those who relish their own power. Lilith, Asherah, Jezebel are inspiring role models for strong, independent women, and their power has been restored. We are speaking their names and honoring them today. After all, after millennia. And I have the feeling that time will not be so kind to Senator Mastriano nor Reverend Moon. Amen, and may that be so. I will now pass on the microphone to Nico, who will talk about some new goddesses.
She's a hard act to follow. So, new goddesses in the sense of contemporary and historical women who have been ignored, obscured, etc. Have you ever had the feeling that you're in a parallel universe? I definitely have. It seems that a lot of people these days have that feeling. Some folks are happy to live with the stories and ideas that they've always known, while others seek out new stories and want a more complete idea of who and what came before them. I've known for a long time that there are some pretty major gaps in what passes for history, and I have been questioning reality as it has been presented to me for many years. This goes back to my 6th birthday when my Auntie Bina gifted me a book on earth science. And this was my first exposure to how natural forces have shaped the planet and the concept of evolution and how it works. This made the natural world a much more dynamic and interesting place than it already was for me at that young age. Fast forward a decade and a half, and I found myself in the art history classes of a brilliant professor at Ripon College named Evelyn Kane. Professor Kane was an American who had spent part of her life growing up in Austria, so she had a much more cosmopolitan upbringing than most of the instructors that I had had in my life. This gave her a much more critical view of American culture, and she wasn't afraid to poke fun at the absurdities that she found in the American Midwest. And she really taught us to think critically about ideas and concepts in art and the world at large. Now, Professor Kane fully embraced the use of the multimedia tools that she had to teach her classes at that time, which meant supplementing the slide projector. Remember those little film squares? So we had a theater basically that projected those. But she would bring in the old reel-to-reel film projector and the videotapes. Remember those, the VHS? So she used these to good effect when I took her seminar, Women in Art. That semester took us on a whirlwind tour of women artists from the European Renaissance to contemporary women artists of the 1980s. One of the prominent contemporary artists that we looked at was Judy Chicago, who I had read a reading from earlier. Judy had recently exhibited her major installation, The Dinner Party, which she created with the help of a team of 129 women artists from 1974 to 1979. This epic room-filling piece is a triangular dinner table set with sculpted ceramic plates for its 39 guests of women from prehistory to various times in the historical era, and sits on a tile floor inscribed with the names of 999 mythical and historical women. This piece is unapologetically feminist, and it holds up a mirror to our perceptions of history that has been shaped by narratives that exalt men while leaving barely a footnote for the women who have always been there, doing great things and working to make our world better for everyone. Another incredible creative woman from that seminar is Laurie Anderson. This amazing musician, inventor, and performance artist has pushed the boundaries of music, video, and storytelling with her multimedia stage shows. Her show Home of the Brave, which was filmed in 1986, was the subject of our study for this seminar. I was completely blown away by Anderson's vision and imagination in combining music, computers, video, dance, spoken word, and an instrument that she invented, an electric violin that uses audio tape on its bow to play back a recorded sound. It was groundbreaking performance then, and it still stands up well almost 40 years later. Going back to the dinner party, one of the guests of that imagined dinner is the artist Artemisia Gentileschi. This early Italian Baroque painter, known for innovative compositions that focused on biblical heroines, was born in 1593. She was an apprentice to her father, Orazio Gentileschi, who was also a painter. Her skills exceeded her father's, so he found her a more skillful painter to apprentice under. Unfortunately, that apprenticeship ended with a sexual assault, painful court trial, and celebrity gossip. Now here we are almost 400 years later, and the news is filled with the same sorts of headlines. But the young artist persevered, and she eventually found patronage under the Medici Duke and was the first woman accepted into the Florentine Academy of Fine Arts. She had a very successful career in the courts of Italy and for King Charles I of England. Artemisia's most well-known subject, Judith, might be a new name to some of you, and until that art history course, I hadn't heard much about her either. But she was a woman of high rank who lived in the Jewish city of Bethulia in the 6th century BCE. When the Assyrian army attacked her city under the leadership of General Holofernes, she devised a plan to help her people. She convinced the Assyrians that she wanted to help them to win the war and charmed her way into a dinner with Holofernes. Once he had passed out, intoxicated from too much wine, Judith and her maid decapitated him while he was passed out. She returned to her people with his head, which energized the Israelite army and threw the Assyrians into chaos and thus saving her people. Coming out of the Harlem Renaissance, sculptor Augusta Savage broke down barriers for women artists of color and fought for equal treatment of African American artists in the art world. She moved from Florida to New York City in 1921 to study at Cooper Union and beat out 142 men for a spot in the school. In 1923, she applied for a summer school program sponsored by the French government, but was ultimately rejected just because of her race. This inspired her activism for equality in the arts, and her subsequent work sculpting prominent leaders in the African American community led to her recognition as a top artist. In 1929, she was admitted to study at l'Académie de la Grande Chaumière in Paris. Upon her return to the United States in 1931, she launched the Savage Studio of Arts and Crafts, which became the Harlem Arts Center. In 1939, she was one of the only 4 women artists commissioned by the 1939 World's Fair in New York to exhibit work there. She dedicated her life to teaching art to others. Of course, women not receiving the recognition that they deserve is not exclusive to the art world. We all learned a few years ago with the book and film Hidden Figures that there wouldn't have been any U.S. men in space if it weren't for Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. They were the skillful mathematicians who performed the complex calculations at Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia, that got John Glenn into orbit. Another woman in science who doesn't get the credit that she is due is Rosalind Franklin. This British scientist working at King's College improved their laboratory's X-ray crystallography equipment. It was this equipment that she used to take the X-ray photographs in 1951 that first revealed the helical structure of DNA molecules. There are also great women in law and social justice that have fallen by the wayside of history, and it just baffles me how their important stories can be forgotten. Recently, I learned a piece of Massachusetts history that should have been a part of my elementary school history lessons, but wasn't. In 1781, Bet, an enslaved woman who came to be known as Elizabeth Freeman from Sheffield, Massachusetts, sued for her freedom from farmer John Ashley. She became the first black woman to successfully sue for her freedom in the state, and the lawsuit directly contributed to the end of legal slavery in Massachusetts. She did this 82 years before emancipation. So how is it we don't hear her story? Fortunately, Elizabeth Freeman is to be honored with a bronze statue that will stand on the grounds of the First Congregational Church of Sheffield, where she attended services. What can we do to ensure that the contributions of women throughout history and today are acknowledged and taught? With recent fights over books and curricula in schools, I don't think it's going to happen without more people taking the time to ask questions, think more critically, and learn new stories. Let's talk about the people, all the people, regardless of sex, gender, or race, who made contributions in all fields and made our world what it is. Some of these stories can be difficult or painful, but only through facing them honestly and with open minds can humanity heal and move forward. Thank you.
Isn't it funny that just as all of these things, sort of come to light and we start to make progress, we've got, same-sex marriage and all of this great stuff and, voices of women and black women especially are being heard finally. And what happens in our country? Well, you gotta make sure this whole critical race crap, stuff starts so that we don't want to actually hear about history, the real history. We certainly don't want our children to know about this stuff. The whole Don't Say Gay bill in Florida blows my mind that we are still stuck here. And it's you white guys. Not counting Nico. No, and I don't mean any harm, of course, and I know I married a nice white guy. So 3 of them, in fact, not all at the same time, but okay, so we are going to close up here with our final hymn that I hope you will sing with me. It is number 327, Joy Thou Goddess. Stand if you like. Joy thou goddess, fair immortal, offspring of Elysium, mad with rapture to the portal of thy holy fane we come. Fashion's laws enjoin again, humankind join again. Humankind is one forever, neath thy mild and gentle reign. Joy in nature's wide dominion, mightiest cause of all is found, and 'tis joy that moves the pinion when the wheel of time goes round. From the bud she lures the flower, sun from out their orbs of light. Distant spheres all other power, far beyond all mortal sight. Nico, would you give us the closing words there. Yep, I left them right near there, and blow out the candles for us.
By north, by west, by south, by east, the sacred circle is released.
Amen, good people. Thank you all for coming today, making this harrowing journey through the half marathon. Thank you so much. Hold fast, church. Stay strong. We love you. Live long and prosper. Go in peace today. Spread it everywhere you go. Let your voice be heard. That's all right.